morning and welcome to the Rawls College of Business Center for Sales and Customer Relationship Excellence webinar, Women in Sales Leadership, Transformers and Trailblazers, featuring Debarati Sen, Vice President at 3M. We are using the Q&A function during today's webinar, so please place any questions for our speaker or moderators there. We now welcome Dr. Atul Parvatiyar, Director of the Center for Sales and Customer Relationship Excellence.
So let me take the opportunity to now introduce to all of you our featured speaker. Once again, I have lots of nostalgic remembrances. I got to know Debarati Sen way back in the 1991 period when she was a student at XLRI, one of the premier institutes of management in India, XLRI in India, and I happened to be a professor over there. And since then, I've been keenly watching her meteoric rise through the corporate leadership. And she is currently the Vice President and General Manager of the Abrasive Division of 3M. She was appointed as the Vice President and General Manager for 3M Abrasive Systems Division from June 2019, and she leads the 3M's global abrasives franchise serving industrial companies and associated sectors. Prior to becoming the Vice President for this division, Deva was also the Managing Director of 3M India region, which is a publicly traded company, leading 3M's public entity there. And between 2016 and 2019, she was the Managing Director and Head and CEO of the India division of 3M. Prior to that, she was also Director of Corporate Sales for the US Atlantic and Pacific branch operations and Director of the Global Oil and Gas business between 2012 and 2015. And she started her career in 3M in 1996 from India. And she's going to talk a little bit about her career before that as well, but let me kind of focus on her 3M career right now. So under her leadership from 2016 to 19, 3M India gained nationwide recognition at prestigious forums. The company was voted the 2017 Business Standard Star Multinational Corporation, 2017 Forbes India Super 50, and also featured in the Outlook magazine of Nation Builders edition. On a personal level, she was inducted into Fortune India's listing of 50 most powerful women in business in 2018. Over 22 years of Deva's career have been in 3M, covering regions in Asia and US, in various global, regional, and country level roles, driving both marketing, sales, as well as customer engagement, product development, business development, strategies, mergers and acquisitions. She has held the position of Vice President of Global Marketing for the Equipment Protection business at Pentair, which is part of the overall group of the company. She's a passionate advocate of women's rights and volunteers at time in addressing multiple issues like homelessness, poverty alleviation, education, and women's empowerment. She's on the board of trustees of Women's Foundation of Minnesota and has also served on the national governing board of Jeremiah Program, a Minnesota-based national charity, and on the board of United Way Bengaluru in the recent past. In 3M, she has served on the board of 3M Action, which is an Asian Employee Resource Network, as well as held the post of executive member of 3M's Women's Leadership Forum. And she's also been an industry leader. During her assignment in India, Deva was co-chair of the Confederation of Indian Industries National Committee on Technology, as well as member of the Karnataka State Council of the Confederation of Indian Industry. She obtained her bachelor's degree in electronics engineering and did her MBA, as I said, from the prestigious Indian institution XLRI, Jamshedpur. And Deva has started her career actually selling, after doing an MBA, started selling liquor as a pillion rider on scooters. I'm going to let her talk about that to start with. And after that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues, Dr. Feruzwan Irani Williams and Dr. Alejandra Marin, who will be in conversation with her But start off, Deba, talking to us about your early career, starting selling liquor, sitting on pillion and sitting in the state of Orissa and in the rural areas. There you go.
Thank you, Dr. Parvatiyar. That was a long intro. You know, one of the things that comes with getting where I have come in life is that you get older and your resume sounds longer. But you know, in all humility, it's been just a fantastic ride, and it's been super energizing. Yes, I did have a lot of fun in my first job. I was responsible as an area sales manager for 4 states for liquor, which essentially was gins, vodkas, whiskeys, rums, you can imagine. And I was 24 years old, so very, very much fun. You know, among the earliest days, I would be riding pillion with my sales reps in that territory and going into liquor stores and villages in a fairly conservative country where they had not seen even a female customer, let alone a female salesperson making a call on them. I do not know if they were having more fun or I was having more fun, but we definitely had a lot of fun. And the novelty factor, I milked it for sure, because I had channel partners at distributors who would say, if madam comes, as they refer to you with respect in India, we'll give you the order. So my sales team members, as you can imagine, I was very popular with them. Long career, a lot of fun, a lot of turns, but really appreciate the opportunity with yourselves, with your students from around the world, to share some of my learnings from my journey. And hopefully coming out of this, there'll be a few thoughts that stick with the listeners, with the audience.
Great. Thank you, Deba, and welcome to the Rawls once again. We really appreciate you here sharing with us this journey, so international and full of challenges, but at the same time learnings. To continue that conversation with the journey, do you have any recollection of key role models that have affected that journey, and what can you tell us about the impact that these role models have caused for you, or have been for you?
Thank you, Alejandro. I really appreciate the question. But maybe I'll pause for a minute before I go into role models to just comment on the fact that it's really important for us to recognize that our careers, all of your listeners, yourselves, our careers are really the result of help, advocacy, support, sponsorship from many leaders and many peers over the years. Those who are talking about you when you're not in the room, those who are placing their vote of confidence in you. There are many, I can't mention them all, but I want to recognize them. And most importantly, encourage everyone listening in to tune into that and recognize those individuals who are forming the bedrock of your support system. They exist. Keep your antenna tuned, listen to what they're saying. They will tell you when you're in the room, and more often when you're not in the room, what you're known for, what are the few things that they recognize you for. So role models, but also your broad network of sponsors, advocates, and supporting peers. For role models, I've had many. I've had the privilege of watching and learning from just some incredible leaders in a well-recognized company. But let me start with my personal role model first. Firstly, my mother. I was the second daughter, and clearly, for those of us who were born in more conservative countries and societies, being a second daughter born to middle-class, educated parents, but middle-class parents, in my generation was still a cause for consternation, as my parents didn't have a son. We were 2 girls. But for my mother, and of course for my father, but more importantly for my mother, her 2 daughters were her greatest assets. Her pride and joy was just there for everyone to see. And the best part of that was that she did not consider any goal too high, too lofty for us. No challenges too hard. She just relentlessly pushed us. My sister is a well-recognized geriatric cardiologist in London, very well known in the NHS system. My mother relentlessly pushed us and also taught us through her own life to live a grateful life, recognizing the contributions of people in the organization, truly creating positive impact without expecting anything in return. to not chase position or money, but to chase impact, to chase positive impact. And all of that, all of those life lessons that I have learned, I am applying in corporate America. My mother was a lifelong teacher, and now she has a fan following of her ex-students all across the world, and she's been a life coach for many. So I had the benefit of having a life coach who was my mother. The second one in my corporate life was the first woman vice president that I worked for. And she was among the very few. This is about 12 years ago now. She was the first female executive vice president in 3M, an incredible woman, larger than life, kinder and tougher than anyone I know. Mother of three, known for addressing the toughest issues with just incredible diligence and empathy. Watching her in action throughout the Great Recession of 2008, thereafter leading 3M's international operations in the recent past through some of the toughest and most turbulent years in geopolitical situations that we faced in the last 5 years, changing world order, all of that. It really made me understand and connect with the impact that I could create one day, how I could release the discretionary energy in the organization, and how to understand my own ability to uplift the organization. So, two role models, personal and professional, but tremendously impactful in my life.
Great. Very interesting that you mentioned your mom, of course, because we also wanted to understand a little bit more about your upbringing and how your upbringing in India, right, with kind of influence your path. Could you expand a little bit more about that upbringing and the first years of a young girl growing up?
Yes, thank you. I'm an engineer by training, and I'm an MBA by training. From the earliest years, being a little girl in India, I was constantly being faced with girls can't be good in math, girls can't be good in science, girls can't go into engineering. And all of those became kind of my clarion call for proving people wrong. So, and I was aided and abetted by my parents, who were just incredibly supportive. And I also grew up in a small town with very limited luxuries, but that gave me a lot of drive. I would like to talk about, my background, the value system that we grew up with. Our parents do their darndest to build this bedrock of values. For me, the recognition that came with my value system was struggles that people face every day, and taking intentionally the time to hold the ladder for those who are coming after us. Recognizing the fact that when I hang up my hat, people will not remember me for the title that I had, but they will remember me for the impact I had on their careers, the time that I took to help them, to teach them, to coach them. So I'm very intentional about ensuring that after I have climbed the ladder, I'm still holding the ladder for people who are coming behind me. And then a part of my upbringing, I would say it's the upbringing that I went through myself. I'm also a single mother. My son was 5 years old when I moved to the US with 2 suitcases, a 5-year-old and $9,000 from 3M as an advance, which I had to return within 2 months. My son is 23 today, sales professional, hopefully getting ready to make more of his positive impact on the world. I would like to say that life has tenderized me, beaten me up to make me better, a better version of myself. I've gained empathy that helps me balance my drive and my energy. And most importantly, the ability to connect with people at a level far deeper than the PowerPoint slide staring at me. So a part of it is upbringing, a part of it is the upbringing that I've been through myself.
Very, very interesting that you mentioned that your son is in sales. So that means you believe in sales, of course. What makes sales, in your opinion, a good launch path for a business career?
It was very reassuring for me when my son selected and chose sales, which was my number one wish for him as a fresh graduate. I was very keen that he start his career in sales, and he has. I'm very proud of him. He has an expanding client book now. He's in technology sales for healthcare sector. And the satisfaction that I hear in his voice when he calls me and tells me how he has solved the problems of a customer, how he has gotten a thank you note from them, it just makes my day. But most importantly, Sales, I see, is the source of the ultimate truth. Organizations exist for their customers. Are we bringing value for our customers? Can we differentiate ourselves versus competition? Everything else in the company, every other function revolves around that ultimate truth. So think of it. When we speak of customer insights leading to innovation, who is closest to that customer insight? Sales is. That's where magic is created every day, not in the analyst presentations, not in the laboratories, which are still trying to best guess what the customer wants, not in the factories and not in the boardrooms. Magic happens every day in sales. There are many ways of describing the impact that sales has and the impact you can create for the organization. I also believe that in my early years in sales has made me almost fearless when it comes to tough business situations. You know, visiting liquor shops, as I talked about, or moving into chemical plants where no woman had visited them before and the security didn't have a protocol for letting me in, or donning an abaya in Saudi Arabia and facing a room full of strangers, all male, and trying to sell 3M's value-added products in Saudi Aramco. It does make you fearless. It makes you very connected with your customers, become better at those insights. And ultimately, when you grow in the corporate ladders, you still know and you still remember what are those key value drivers. You're still connected naturally. Your brain has been conditioned, trained to stay connected to the ultimate source of truth in an organization, which are our customers. What are they looking for? What is real, meaningful value for them?
Oh, wow. Great. Very interesting. You keep that, right? So, Deba, in your experience and with all these different roles and especially, of course, sales, but also in other roles, were the expectations different because you are a woman?
You know, that's an interesting one. I do believe that once you're in the role, the novelty factor wears off once you're in the role. Depending on the field, there may be some additional skepticism that stays on for a little bit longer. Fields like pharma, medical devices, food, apparel, sales has incredibly good representation from women in those industries. But when you look at more traditional industries, like I'm an industrial, representation of women in sales is still pretty low. Manufacturing, sporting goods, or liquor, my first one, numbers are still small. It's important to remember that the role is the role, and the expectations don't change because you're a woman or a man. The barriers may be higher to get into that role. Biases may be prevalent about whether a woman can do that job or not do that job. But once you get in, once you're in the room to make that decision, to move on with your role, you try hard and you always make sure that you're being the best in class, that you're being the best across the comparators, across your peer group, and people then forget that you're a woman. Somebody took a chance on me in putting me in these roles. 28 years ago, I was hired as the first woman in the liquor company, UB Group, that I joined in a fairly traditional country. Somebody took a chance. So somebody has to let you into the room. Once you're in the room, once you're in that job, once you're in that role, then it's on you. And if you're the hardest working, the smartest working, the most dedicated, the most intuitively connected person, you will be incredibly successful. The everyday role expectations don't change because you're a man or a woman. The bar is high. And if you can cross that bar every day and deliver that value every day, you are going to be very successful. I often say that, success is not owned. Success is rented, and the rent falls due every morning. And that's really important, no matter whether you're a man or a woman, you're young, you're old, to remember that every day. Is your scorecard is today. It's empty this morning when you start your job, when you're starting your day. Whatever you did the prior day, that does not translate into this day. And it brings about this incredible urgency and sense of purpose when you're looking at what you're supposed to deliver today. So I didn't necessarily feel that the expectations were different. I did feel the weight of being a woman in many roles where I was the first, and I did not want to be the last. So I worked very, very hard to make sure that I was a very successful first data point for those that came after me.
Very interesting. So it depends on how you also embrace the role, right? That you break those These biases. Of course, very international. I'm Colombian, so the idea of working in different countries and traveling and living, I kind of resonates with many of us in this panel. And of course, Deba, for you as well. So you have worked over 30 countries and live in some of them, with, of course, meeting people from all over the world. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience, on what have you learned, ups, downs of that kind of very international experience?
Yeah, I would say, hands down, that has been the most exciting and the most humbling part of my entire career and of my life broadly. I was 28 years old when I started working across Asia. I was just incredibly energized. And now, after many more years, I would say I would use the term completely addicted to international business. And that's essentially because of two reasons. For me, it's a steep learning curve. I tell people I'm perennially on an 89-degree learning curve. Any more, 1 degree more, and I'll tip over, right? So it has got to be just incredibly exciting for your brain. I know it is for my brain. When you're learning as fast and as hard as you are, and every time you think you're on top of that hill, another hill comes ahead of you in terms of learning. So I figure out, how to win in China, and then I go into Thailand, and I have to think through this all over again. So it was just really exciting for me in the early years, and that's how I realized that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life: be in global business. And the good part was that the company recognized that what I was bringing to the table was very attractive to the countries that I was appointed to serve, that I was helping. And I would just highlight a couple of those parameters that I think made me specifically successful. I'm known and recognized as a global business leader. The first is humility. There may be a tendency, especially no matter which company you're in, no matter which part of the world you're in, there is a headquarter bias which tends to have, set people in preconceived notions that we're trying to bring to whatever part of the world we're going to. But humility intentionally fights that. So you're not bringing preconceived notions. You're truly trying to understand what the customers need, what that framework, go-to-market business models are, and how do you serve that market with the value set that you're bringing from your company best. The second piece is empathy. Truly bringing a desire to understand and to help the people that you're serving around the world. The third one that I would talk about is equality. And I've talked about this in many forums. If you deeply, genuinely believe in the equality of all human beings, you're a successful global leader. If you bring ethnocentric practices where you think I'm American and therefore I'm higher than others, I'm German, therefore my engineering capabilities are better than anybody else, I'm Japanese, therefore my quality systems are better than anybody else, it goes against these three, humility, empathy, and equality. Deep belief in these three elements is, I think, what has made me successful in the world of international business. And it all begins with humility, knowing that you are the beginning of your journey for the rest of your life, not at the end of your journey. You don't know everything, you're learning, and the people around you, the customers on ground will teach you.
Great. Fersan, I think the India question will be great here.
Yes, I know. That was so extremely insightful. Speaking of your international career, I know you've led countrywide operations, especially for a country like India. I'm originally from India too, and I know how very complex India's business, labor, and political systems are. So, in your opinion, are there differences between country level leadership as opposed to leading a division within a business?
Yeah, I mean, you embedded two questions there, Ferzan, and I'll try my best to answer them. I think the first one is country versus kind of global division responsibility. I've also had global business responsibility for oil and gas. I've had corporate sales responsibility for the company. The country responsibility tends to be a little bit different versus some of the others. They're just different muscles. You have all your muscles. You just choose to exercise them differently when you're doing your triceps exercises versus when you're doing your squats. I just had a long workout session yesterday, so it's very fresh in my mind. You need all your muscles, but you have to be intentional about when and where you're pulling out and most exercising it the most. So you tend to lean more into your strategic, longer range muscles in a global division role versus more operational, functional management elements in a country role. The country role also gives you an incredible opportunity, and I strongly recommend it, and I hope many of the listeners get an opportunity to get deeper into some of these country level roles if they have the opportunity to work in large multinationals. You get the opportunity to be a brand ambassador at a very high level. I think on behalf of the company, I really, really enjoyed that opportunity to live the values of our company every day, to truly participate. I was leading the Confederation of Indian Industries National Technology Committee. It was focused on R&D, patents, IP, working with the government, the Department of Science and Technology to change policy. Now, that sort of opportunity comes once in a lifetime or a few times in your lifetime. And that was just absolutely energizing, addicting. But as I look at my role today, leaning into different set of muscles, setting the company for success for the next 100 years. 3M is one of the most innovative companies. Our first business was sandpaper. We were a mining company that found a mineral that we thought was going to be among the hardest, turned out to be not among the hardest. We had to do something else with it. We created the world's first sandpaper. That's my business. It's now 120 years old, almost. What do I need to do? What does my team need to do? What do we fundamentally need to do to build another 100 years of this business? So it's as you can see in those comparisons, it's a far more longer ranging view. India, let me just comment very quickly on country leadership roles in developing geographies, in countries that are large demand centers, very complicated when it comes to the policy frameworks. I would always say that if you have seen VUCA, volatile, ambiguous environments and markets, India was VUCA on steroids. And one could say the same on China. Very energizing, very dramatic markets to serve, but you have to have agility as an additional muscle that you're exercising all the time. So it was operational, functional, and agile. As I was in India, in those 3 years, we went through very large-scale policy changes, demonetization, GST, auto crisis. It was just, one after the other. I knew every 6 months there's going to be rules of the game will be changed. So it brings about that agility. And I used to tell people that it's you can design for plan A, but be ready with your plan C, because A will never work. B will likely work only halfway. You have to have your plan C. So the ability to forecast and predict the parameter changes, and then what does it mean in terms of impact on your team, impact on your internal strategies and your tactics was really important. So two slightly different questions embedded in one, but I would strongly encourage everybody early in your career, get the opportunity to go into fast-moving, faster growth, developing geographies. Don't look for that role in Europe. It's cushy, you know what to expect. It's Western world. Go into Thailand, go into India, go into Brazil, go into Peru. Learn how the developing world works.
That is fascinating. Brought back some memories. So, that brings me to you sitting in the C-suite for a multi-billion-dollar business like 3M. You've kind of touched on this, but what is that experience like for you as a woman sitting in that C-suite?
Dean Williams covered some of the starkness of the numbers, and I would go back to the fact that we do have a real situation with respect to representation. I often remind people that you can't have progress without representation. My apologies. You cannot have progress without representation. So the first challenge is representation. And I'm just so grateful that Dean Williams highlighted this, that representation is dependent on the pipeline and dependent on institutions like yourselves, making this an attractive space, business management being an attractive space, bringing in more pipeline into the corporate world. We need your help. We need that part. Thereafter, it is our responsibility to ensure that we are making the pathway smoother. Madeleine Albright is probably my all-time favorite when she spoke about there's a special place in hell for women who don't help women, other women. I think of it intentionally at holding onto the ladder and not just climbing up and then letting the ladder fall. Hold the ladder for those who come behind you. But in our company, in the last 5 years, we were recognized with a Catalyst Award for the greatest progress made in representation in our executive conference, as we call it, which is what I'm a part of women. We're now well over 33% in that population. We're obviously much broader in the population that comes the following job grades or the job grades below us, and very, very intentional on our pipeline. We're also very intentional on areas where corporate America has not made as much progress, which is really representation from our Hispanic populations, from our African American populations in the US of A, from our Native American population. So we are very intentional about it. At the end of the day, I do believe that our eyes are set behind in our heads for a reason. I don't enter the room and see me as a woman. I enter the room and I see everybody else. And there are many times in my life where after a meeting, after a big presentation, after a specific conversation, I would come out of the room saying, you know what, I was again in a room full of men and I was the only woman. But it's still there. It is not, it's not gone away, unfortunately. And I thought when my generation was entering the workforce in the early 90s that we were going to fix it and it was going to be behind us. It's not behind us yet. I do not wake up in the morning and think of myself as a woman leader. I think of my challenges, my tasks, my imperatives, no different versus a male leader does. But we do have to recognize that there's more work to be done. Most women leaders in our times are conscious of the load they carry for those who come after us to ensure there are fewer and fewer C-suite roles where you are the first, where you are still called out as the first woman. I was the first female managing director of India. I hope I'm not the last. I replaced an incredibly respected female leader in my current role, who was the vice president before me. And that was energizing for me, that I was not the first. I don't think women leaders in my generation want to remain or want to be called out as the first. That means what we were trying to fight for, what we were trying to work towards in the last 30 years has not quite happened. And that's unfortunately the stark reality. Women do, generally speaking, bring in a higher spirit of collaboration and empathy. And sometimes they change, or very often they change the group dynamics very, very quickly in a short span of time. More trust, more empathy helps drive better performance. I think I mentioned this to Farzan, and I'll take the liberty of mentioning it again. In 2018, Google did a broad survey of all their project teams among one of the most innovative companies that brings about so many new improvements in their products, also impacting broadly other industries. We work with them in collaboration for several of our product innovation teams. They found that their most successful teams were the ones that had demonstrated the highest trust and the highest empathy. Multiple diversity studies have found similar themes of collaboration, trust, acceptance, leading to breakthrough performance. So as a woman leader, I see that not just in myself, but in my women leaders. I have three, in my operating committee, I have 3 women. Not enough, still not 50%. But I'm intentional about increasing the number. I'm intentional about bringing people behind me. I was watching the 4th season of Crown, I think this weekend. Margaret Thatcher's cabinet is not a sign of success, where she's the only woman surrounded by a lot of men. That is not a measure of success. I'm very intentional about it, but as Dean Williams rightly pointed, a lot more work needs to be done ahead of us. And I very much appreciate the support from institutions like yours to help us bring in that pipeline, a broader mouth of the funnel.
Yeah, I know a lot more work needs to be done, but there's so much hope, right? So much possibility in the future, in the near future, that it's very exciting. And you've had a long leadership journey. You've been a leader for a while, culminating in the C-suite. What would you say is your leadership style? My leadership style. So it's funny how
we go through so many assessments, as you can imagine, a large company. I just completed my latest assessment, a full leadership assessment that gets submitted to our CEO and to our corporate operating committee on where I am, where I'm going, et cetera. And I went back on a similar assessment that was done 10 years ago on me. The fun part is that the common denominators are still very consistent. So I will just share some of those common denominators that keep getting articulated over and over again when people think of me, so or when they're talking about me. So it's passion, it's energy, it's drive, it's the ability to synthesize very complex situations very quickly. Grew up in a developing, fast-paced economy, then was nurtured in the world's largest economy in the US. So obviously some of that comes from my background, comes from what I've learned. And then along with that comes the other side of the coin. So in your style, you will always have some very strong muscles. And by virtue of those muscles being strong or more strong, you will also have some that you're cleared, that remain your development areas that you need to be intentional on. And in all humility, I would like to share, for me, that's listening. That's pausing to allow people to catch up with me. I tend to move very fast from point A to point B or to the destination, and I have to pause and I have to intentionally spend time in making sure everyone's with me. A long time ago, one of my earlier leaders had told me that leadership essentially means that you need to have followers in your ship. You can't be a leader if there's no one in your ship. When you look behind you and you've reached the end point, but there's no one with you, you're not a leader. That's not leadership. So my other side of the coin is always intentionally pausing, sharing with my team members and the broader, obviously several thousand members in the organization, to share with them where my head is at, what am I thinking about, and ensuring that they're feeling a part of it, they're a part of the solution seeking, and they're coming with me. We are together in this.
Well, that's a very well-rounded leadership style, I would say. And given the success of your career thus far, I think your trajectory is that you're probably gonna get tapped pretty soon to lead an organization, I would say, whether it's 3M or any other organization. What changes or transformations would you champion when you get to that level?
You know, very early in my career, maybe 10 years back, not that early, but 10 years back, I was shown the way, I would say, by Julie, the person that I was talking about earlier, a very, very well-regarded leader in 3M. And her point to me, or her coaching to me, was focus on the impact that you can create. With every job comes greater impact, but every job also has incredible opportunity for change and transformation. So I tend to worry less about what am I going to do in the roles ahead of me than my worry and my thought process about what am I going to do in the role that I have. As I mentioned, I'm leading the company's oldest business, and therefore the most the largest opportunity hopper, but the most inherited issues too, right? And I also believe that every leader in my organization is a general manager of their business, their function, their area of responsibility. So I tend to champion every day for a strong, codependent team that has very strong people, very successful people who are bringing their edge for their function, their business area, but have the humility to learn and continue their learning journey. I personally still feel that I'm in the kindergarten of leadership, and I need to continue to learn and adapt and change as fast as I can, given a very fast and a dynamic world outside. 2020 has really proven that what matters and what makes us successful is our learning agility, is our ability to move where the path is going, to anticipate where the path may be going, but not to look back and build upon what we've known before. So I don't believe that there are things that I can only do in my future that I can't do them today. I'm living it every day. What I would do in future is also what I'm doing today. And it's the scale that's different. It's the environment that's different. It's the business situations that we'll be facing. That'll be different. So my core fundamental values, what I lead with, what I look for, market differentiated performance, a strong, cohesive team that has the humility to learn from each other, and ensuring that we are driving the right purpose, staying anchored to our customers. That's me every day. It wouldn't change tomorrow if I'm in a different role.
That's awesome. So overall, what advice would you give other women as they embark on their own unique leadership journeys?
Yeah, obviously, that's something that I put a lot of thought to. I mentor a lot of young women. I also am peer mentor to several other women at our company at my level, and that's that core fundamental value that I have of supporting others and ensuring that everybody has a chance at success. My few key thoughts that I would share with women, because if everything was equal, we wouldn't be having the numbers that we have right now. So there is still work to be done. But I would remind younger women earlier in their careers in the universities that bring your authentic self every day to work or to life. You don't have to become somebody else to be successful. You don't have to emulate a man. Very recently, a niece of mine in a tech company in the Valley was told that she needed to dress like a man. Today, she is a Stanford computer science graduate. Today, being told to dress like a man to be successful in a leading tech company in the Valley. You don't have to do that. Bring your authentic self, whether that be you like jewelry, you like nice dresses, you like boots, I don't care. Bring your authentic self. You don't have to become somebody else to be successful. The most important part from my perspective is please do not self-select out of the high-level jobs, out of the tougher, so-called tougher jobs, out of the traveling jobs, out of the global jobs. Do not self-select. Don't hold yourself back. If a job sounds too big, study it harder. Lean more into it. Don't pull yourself out. You'll figure out a way. If you've gotten to where you have today, it hasn't happened because everything was handed to you on a platter. Rarely would anybody on this phone say, oh, in my life, everything came easy. Everything was handed to me on a platter. You all had to work at it. Everybody had to go through their own struggles. I don't know what your struggles were, but I have enough of mine to know that things always look difficult in the beginning. You just have to work through it. Do not self-select. Women tend to self-select. Well, I will take myself off the growth ladder, the promotion ladder when I have a baby. I'm getting married, so I am going to take myself out, self-select out. Just don't do that. Work through it. You can do it all. I'm very, very convinced. I'm a single mother in a different continent. If I could get to this point, so can you. Just don't lean out of it, lean into it. And then I would strongly suggest, my formula for success has been what I affectionately call my 3 H's: hunger, humility, and heart. It's the most energizing for the people around you. They would embrace you when you're leading with hunger, which essentially means you're trying to change the status quo. You're trying to make the world a better place. Your business, your area, your territory, whatever that be, you're bringing that hunger. Bring the humility, because you are not a perfect product. You'll never be. And hopefully you'll keep working on becoming better every day. That's that humility, that student mindset. And heart. Heart is all about purpose. Don't do it for the wrong reasons. Do everything that you do for the right reasons. And we all know right from wrong. So purpose, just lead with purpose. That's that heart piece of it. And then one question I get asked all the time about work balance, right? So for men and for women, I would say that balance is mythical. Strive for excellence in every part of your life. I used to share this example that I never had balance in my life. I still don't have balance in my life, but I have intent. On the weekends and in the evenings after 6 o'clock, my intent was my son. I didn't have another parent to share him with. I was always doing it all myself. So I had to be very intentional. I use an analogy. I tell people that treat your family like your key accounts. You know you're going to make time for your key accounts, make time for your family. Be intentional about what you're going to achieve this week and the next. So you can have a very happy life by being very intentional about your life and your work. But it's not work-life balance. That's mythical.
That is fantastic advice. It kind of makes me like, yes, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. This conversation has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you. That is it from the questions from Alejandra and I, but I know Atul's been monitoring the Q&A and we have some questions from our audience. Atul?
Yes, excuse me. Yes, indeed. And I think there are some very interesting questions that are coming along the way. I'm just going to quickly, capture a few key things that you said, Deba, before I hand over the questions. And I was trying to take some notes. In addition to many other things, I like your 3HS model, as well as the fact that you mentioned about the aspect of having humility and empathy and the consideration of equality. What I heard you all along your journey has been that you have been intentional, you have been purposeful, you have been always fearless, which has kind of taken you where you've gone, and you have also been hungry. And I think these are some great takeaways for all of us to understand that your agility comes from the traits that you develop. And this is part of the trait, some of it is obviously there are always mentors along the way. All of us have mentors that have helped, but it is what you do that makes all the difference. In this regard, we have got some questions, and I'm going to pick up two questions. First, from one of my other very favorite persons, that is Tara Whitehead. She has also been a strong leader. If you don't know, she is the partner for the digital business of Cognizant. She has worked in IBM and other places. And she has two questions for you. I'm going to take the first one first. That how do you stay calm under the fire, under fire, particularly when you're trying to sell in a room, virtual or in person, full of men? So I want to throw that question to you, that what Tara is asking you.
So that's a fantastic question, because embedded in that question is this perception that women are emotional. That's a word I hear often. Women are emotional, and I think watching Crown and hearing Margaret Thatcher say, "Of course not. I won't have any women in my cabinet. Women are emotional." I would offer a counter perspective. I actually leaned into my emotions. I lean into my passion. I come from a country where passion is very distributed. Everybody has passion. My gosh, Bollywood movies, if anybody has seen them, a lot of passion. But that's not my limiter. That's not my handicap. That's my strength. And being a woman, passion is something that's totally okay. As you go into a room leaning into your passion, knowing that you feel things more deeply because you're a woman, leaning into that and leveraging your passion, leveraging your emotions within quote, to bring more people your way, that has really worked well for me. Something that I have noticed is, and some men do it wonderfully. This is a broad generalization with all apologies, but the ability to connect with your audience, to actually make eye contact when somebody is not speaking. That has been my biggest strength, is to observe who's leaning into me, who's giving me the support. I'll take an example of going into Korea in a very large shipyard and facing 16 people from the union, from the safety, from the government in that locality, because what we were providing to them and had some issues on, I really felt I was facing a firing squad. And the next day, and this is Hyundai Heavy Engineering, the next day they published a union newsletter which said the capitalists from US had come and faced our questions and solved our problems. That wasn't being, fearless is not absence of fear. Fearless is recognizing the fear and being ready for it. So I used the eye contact. I looked into people's eyes, trying to figure out in a very different cultural milieu who was with me and who wasn't with me. And then you focus your effort on understanding those who are not with you, why they're not with you. So leaning into your EQ, leaning into your emotions, leaning into your passion is a huge strength in that situation. But there were moments when I felt like crying, I didn't cry there, but I definitely came home and had a nice big bawl, and that helped me get it out of my system.
That is fascinating. I think, the two things that go hand in hand, it looks like. One is intentional and the other one is intensity. having probably coming from a culture like India where everything is intense. The heat is intense, the dust is intense, the emotions are intense, everything is intense. So it kind of shows the intensity is part of, a culturation that you go through. And there is one question, before I come back to the second question from Tara, there's another question from an anonymous attendee who doesn't want to disclose the name, says, you mentioned that it is exciting to constantly be on the 89-degree learning curve. Have you ever had a time when it was difficult to be in a constantly learning mindset? And how do you remotivate yourself during these challenging moments? So,
yeah, very, very good question. Yes, it is. It's extremely addictive being on that steep learning curve. I probably don't have a great analogy, but I am addicted with the adrenaline that you get when you're on that 89-degree learning curve. But you have to recognize the adrenaline also makes you tired. So being very intentional when you're done performing at that incredible high level, you have to be intentional about nurturing, self-nurture. I was a single mother. I had very little time to self-nurture, but I would on weekends or Friday evenings find a play date for my son and actually pour myself a glass of wine and watch a completely pointless, mindless, brainless TV serial, whatever it takes you. Everybody has different recharging mechanisms. You might love to go for a run, for a cross-country skiing, or whatever that be. Find your love and give yourself that time, because your brain needs to rest and recharge. That's such a good question and such a good recognition that you can't keep going at 89 degrees. Think of yourself as a mountain climber and you're vertical. You can't go at that every hour of the day, 365 days in the year. You have to cull out days. And for me, the weekend was it. And I could recharge my batteries, being intentional about it, and then coming back and ready again and addicted on that adrenaline high.
So it's very fascinating that the journey continues when you have the ability to re-energize yourself all the time. And therefore, that's a very important point. Not getting burnt out is one of the most important things for any journey to continue. And we all know people who have continued in the careers way past the 90s even. Peter Drucker is a very good example of that. And we have some colleagues also in our department. For example, we have Professor Shelby Hunt and my mentor, Dr. Jagdish said, who have all past their 80s and still going strong, very strong in terms of what they do. So in all these aspects, you need to have the constant motivation to do things. And there is one more question that Tara is asking that is a lot more related to the current situation. She's saying, what are the 3 tips you would offer to all of us how best to connect and sell in the post-COVID world when we often cannot see clients in person?
Yeah, it's very much the AD and BC situation before COVID and the current situation as we call it. Very much an intentional journey for all the companies, for sure in our company. We are trying to be very conscious of the fact that people are getting digital burnout right now. So having a boatload of webinars for them to attend, sessions for them to attend is not necessarily what their brains can take anymore. And please know that in my world, it's a lot of manufacturing industries. These are people who are still having to go to work in a scenario where there's community spread. They're nervous about how to keep their plants running, how to keep their crews in. We have to be very intentional about how we reach them, when we reach them, and give them the power to reach out to us more. So we are doing actually much more one-on-ones. We are being very intentional about when they have time to send them material that they might want to read in their spare time, rather than asking for Zoom calls or Teams calls in our case, but creating a lot more digital, easily accessible, easily self-servable. We use that term self-serve a lot now. So moving from e-commerce thought process to self-serve, digital self-serve thought process. So our customers can draw upon it, but they need to know that it exists. So we're doing more one-on-one connections, telling them what exists, but not overloading them, not driving them to feel like we are invading their digital space. At the same time, investing, and this is the foundational core of sales, investing in learning about what is important to our customers, what are they looking for right now, what are their challenges right now, and weaving our messaging around that. So we're being far more targeted in how our message goes out. We know the industries that are most under pressure in my world for capacity. We are targeting robotics and automation messages to those. So get back to the fundamentals, but be very conscious of how much digital overload is there in all our lives and therefore in our customers' lives. That's a great question, and one that I would strongly encourage everyone to share their thoughts on. We are learning, and we want to learn from each other right now.
That's very, very fascinating. In fact, that brings about a very interesting question that's from my side, that, as it is, the world of sales has changed. There was a time, and I say that probably 20, 30 years ago, when people who were successful in sales were those who had a great personality and good product knowledge, and they succeeded. And then we came into this era of building customer relationships and customer engagement. And then fast forward in today's world where customers are a lot more knowledgeable themselves. They don't need the product knowledge from you. They probably can do it themselves. And therefore, the role of sales is very, very different when you're researching more about the customer. And you just mentioned that given the COVID intervention, what is happening is we are trying to empower the customer a lot more through the digital asset. So as the customers get more and more empowered, what becomes the role of the sales?
Yeah, and sales has always suffered from this traditional snake oil salesperson type of perception. Sales is an intuitive customer engagement and customer insight function at the highest level. That does not go away anywhere till customers exist. What has happened, and I'm seeing this in our company too, in the past, you would have 100 people thematically that are connecting with customers, visiting them every day, and 20 people on the phone supporting them. That number for us today is almost 50-50. So there's a lot more back-end work that happens in this digital self-serve model, in the enabling model for our salespeople. So they are not doing prospecting. Prospecting is all now digital, right? We have very highly capable engines that can go and qualify our customers, that can prospect, qualify, and serve. So our front-end efficiency has gone up dramatically, but we have had to build up that back-end capability. Like any other function, sales as a function is evolving as we speak. It is not the carry donuts, and I'm kind of using the example of 20 years ago when I was visiting the US. Oh, we are stopping by in Beaumont, Texas, and we're going to be visiting 3 refineries, and we're going to be carrying, donuts for, chatting with the folks on the floor. That is gone. The folks on the floor don't want to sit around and eat donuts to begin with and to chat with us. What they want, they're all on, they're on their tablets and they're on their HMIs, and they want to know, how do they figure out when something is not working and not giving them the finish? How do they find, why is it not working? How do they find the solution? It's our job to self-serve them, but to make sure we know what are they struggling with. That's still the front end, but the front end is not a donut bearing, coffee guzzling, backslapping version. The front end is a very astute, digitally equipped, customer connected, insight rich front end.
That's very fascinating. That's, increasingly that means we are moving towards selling without the sales force, and the sales force becoming more of the analytical and solution planner rather than being the front end transaction doer. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, I don't call it as we're moving away from the sales force. The sales force is evolving into what maybe in the past we would have thought more marketing-like. But those boundaries are evolving, and marketing today is more digital insights anyway. So and analytics, right? Marketing has become so much more analytics. So the functions are evolving based on our own capabilities to solve our customers' problem and to understand and map our universe faster. So I just see it as evolution. But I'm just, based on everything we see, without that end of the day, without that human touch point, whatever form that comes, howsoever equipped it comes, without that human touch point, it's very hard to know customer insights. And that's the core engine of any company.
That's good to know that there is still a role for the people in the sales. And with that, I have question to ask you for my students. Two questions, actually. One is, there are lots of people, as Dean Williams said, that we have almost about 30-40%, or if not more, of women who are in our sales courses. For example, in my classes, I have at least 30-40% of them. They're all looking towards you and saying, I want to be like you, number one. And then we've got the men who are also wanting to be like you, in the sense that they were also looking towards a trajectory to become a leader. So what would you recommend to them, both from the women to say that the sales is a great career for them and it can lead to top leadership, and to men to say that along the way, there will be a lot of women leaders that you're going to be dealing with, and therefore they will have to be at their best in the sense of an equality perspective. So what is it that takes both of them towards the leadership position?
Yeah, as I was mentioning, leadership is not male leadership or female leadership. I don't get up in the morning and think of my problems via female leader lens. I just think of it through a leader lens. So for hopefully all of the thoughts that I shared so far connects with men and women in the audience, and just anybody in between, that what I was sharing is really leadership lessons and leadership, in all humility, leadership learnings that I've had. I would just say, net, embrace diversity. As I was mentioning and sharing the Google example too, there is just an incredible body of research that as the audience, the students join the workforce, you will see incredible body of research that says diversity of thought leads to ultimate success in companies. That diversity may come from men, that diversity may come from women, that diversity may come from race, that diversity may come from location, country of birth, whatever that be. More perspectives help a company connect better. Our customer bodies are very diverse. Our global landscape is very diverse. So embrace diversity, help diversity, support diversity. As a woman leader, I have to support my disabled population. I have to support my veteran population. I don't just support my women population, right? So support diversity in all its forms, and you would see, and hopefully I can say this with confidence, you'll have an incredibly enriching career yourself.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I think, diversity is something which we all need to celebrate, as you rightly said. And with the leadership of Dean Williams, we have a whole diversity initiative at our College of Business. In fact, Dr. Kristen Cook is also online right now listening to you. He is leading our diversity initiative within the College of Business. And as you rightly said, diversity is not limited only to gender, but diversity in terms of all its facets, both men, women, and people in between, as you rightly referred to, plus people of color and people of different nationalities and different cultural orientation. So diversity is something to be celebrated, and that's what we are trying to do, learn from the diversity in this. So I would like to thank you, definitely, Deba, for taking your time and for a very stimulating discussion. And it has really been very, very helpful in this regard. Also want to thank my colleagues, Dr. Alejandra Marin and Dr. Firuzan Irani Williams, for leading the charge in terms of having some stimulating questions to you and get the best out of you in this conversation for the learning for all our students. I also want to thank my esteemed colleagues, Julie Das behind the scene. She has been absolutely instrumental in making all this happen. I can call upon her for everything. Also, Matthew Winfrey for making all this happen technically without a glitch. And Deba, when he said that there is going to be no glitch, he really meant it. You never believed him in that one, but he really knows his own art very, very well. So without a glitch. And also want to thank Dean Williams for her kind of blessing the whole occasion. And not to forget Professor Carlton Whitehead and Tara Whitehead and the family, Carlton Whitehead family, for their generous support for the supporting the Distinguished Speaker Series. And I want to thank all the participants, including my students who have joined in today, hopefully, and my colleagues. I do know several of my professor colleagues who are also there, Professor Jeffrey Harper, Dr. Kristen Cook, and Ryan Todd, who is our Senior Director of Development. who is another important person behind the scene. So I want to thank him as well. And thank all of you. Greatly appreciate it. And I hope it was a learning experience as much for everybody as it has been for me. And I'm very proud of you, Deba. I must say this, professors always take pride in what they see, people with whom they have kind of interacted during the college time and see that journey as it goes along. So I've been very fortunate to see, the career rise. And we hope that you will continue to interact with us as we go along this. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. And
thank you so much.
Let's give a big hand to everybody on this and all the best.